morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the SCIO press conference. And today we will review on some latest economic statistics and data. And it's our great honor to have spokesperson and Deputy Administrator of SAFE, Ms. Wang Chunying, and she will be briefing you on the foreign exchange receipt and payment data of the first half of 2022. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please, first of all, allow me to brief you on the receipt and payment data of the first half of foreign exchange. Since 2002, we are facing very complex international situation. The pandemic goes on and off, and the prospect of a global economy remains uncertain. With the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee, with General Secretary Xi Jinping at its core, the microeconomic factors of China in recent years begins to pick up, and we are seeing signs of recovery and bottom up, and our foreign exchange market and exchange rate remains stable, and the flow of Forex account is very stable as well. In the first half, denominated in the USD, the total balance is about 300 billion USD, and denominated in the RMB, the balance is 8.6 trillion. And in terms of denominated in the USD, the income in the banks is the payment is about 3 trillion, with a deficit of 20 billion USD, and the payment is $20 billion. And in the first half, our receipt and payment shows the following aspects. First of all, we register a surplus in terms of our Forex account, amounting to about 80 billion USD. In Q1, we register a very high number, which is about 58 billion. And in the Q2, the surplus has been shrinking to about 20 billion, but it remains a surplus after all. And also in terms of a foreign currency, it is rising by a small margin. In terms of purchase of exchange, foreign exchange, and also foreign exchange payment is about 66%, which is about 2 percentage points higher than that of last year. In terms of foreign financing, by the end of June, the business's surplus is about 300 billion USD, which is the same level of 2021. And the second feature is that the cross-country, cross-border finance remains stable as well. In terms of currency settlement, for businesses, it remains quite stable. The payment rate is about 67%, and the businesses reserve is about 600 billion USD, which is roughly the same with that of 2000. The fourth feature, for the foreign exchange derivatives, we've seen rising in this arena in the first half. A lot of businesses are using financial derivatives, and the total number exceeds 750 billion USD, which is up by 29%, which is much higher than the settlement of currency. So this 26% is 4.1 percentage higher than that of last year. We can see from these numbers that the businesses and the market participants are more adaptive to the fluctuation of foreign exchange rate. So the market participants have a higher awareness in terms of risk avoidance. In terms of foreign reserve, it's about 3 trillion USD. And when it comes to foreign exchange, we also talk about the other currencies. The USD index is rising, and because most of the foreign reserves in the countries are denominated in the USD. And these are the features of the first half in terms of foreign exchange account. Coming up, SAFE will continue to act according to the instructions of the CPC Central Committee and will continue to deepen our reform in this regard so as to facilitate the development and foreign trade and to promote economic growth. And we will also be improving the quality of foreign exchange market so as to maintain this safe operation of the Forex market and welcome in order to prepare for the opening of the 20th CPC committee, CPC conference. And now the floor is open to questions. Please identify yourself before raising the question. Thank you. With the CMG and CCTV. My question is, since this year we are facing a lot of complex external environment, so how do you evaluate the performance of Forex market in the first half? Thank you. Since this year, it's fair to say that we are facing more and more external, more and more complex external factors. But in terms of the price factor of RMB, and in terms of Forex receipt and payment, it is very clear that the Forex market has become more resilient. To be more specific, the RMB exchange rate has become more and more resilient and has put on a very sound performance in the Forex market. Because of the rise of interest rate in the US, and the USD is becoming stronger this year, and the other currencies become weaker. Against such backdrop, the RMB exchange rate against the US has been depreciated, but compared to the other foreign currency, the RMB value remains quite strong, remains quite stable. Let's compare the exchange rate of USD against other currencies. This year, the USD exchange rate is raised by about 11%, and major currencies are depreciated against the US about 10 to 17%, but that number for RMB is about 5%. In terms of multilateral currency exchange rate, the RMB index is actually up by 0.1%, so that we are showing that we are quite stable against the SDR. And also in terms of expectations, the market has no major expectations for sharp rise or fall of RMB exchange rate. So from recent numbers, we can see that the USD continues to maintain a very strong position. But RMB is another very stable currency in the Forex market. So those are some quantitative numbers that I can give you. RMB is putting on a very sound performance in the international market. And also in terms of cross-border transfer, RMB is also very balanced and show good momentum in terms of growth. In the first half, as I mentioned, we registered deficit in terms of foreign currency settlement. We experienced some fluctuations due to seasonal factors and some other factors, but the overall momentum remain promising, which shows that our receipt and payment system is very healthy at the moment. And the third point I'd like to make is that in terms of structure, our current account surplus and inflow of capital remained sound and healthy, and this is the basics for our Forex reserve. The balance for current account is about 800 billion USD, up by 25% compared to last year, and accounting for 2.1% of the GDP. And in Q2, the numbers are not all out yet, but our commodity trade registers surplus, and in Q2, the current account should register a reasonable amount of surplus as well. And now let's move on to capital account. The direct investment and investment of a solid good or asset are also very healthy because China's economic growth prospect is very promising. We are continuing to improve market environment as well, thus attracting long-term asset investment. From the first 5 months of this year, the actual use of foreign investment is about 8 trillion USD. And also we see sound performance in terms of debt market. All of these factors would actually hedge the fluctuation in the exchange rate market. So China's economy is quite resilient and promising in the long term. This provides a favorable environment and sound basic facts for the Forex market. That's my answer to your question. Next, please. Thank you. Currently, the major developed economies' currency policies are changing. They're undergoing a lot of changes. So, how do you evaluate the foreign capital's purchase of Chinese bonds and its development trend? Thank you. I actually answered part of your question in my previous reply. I will now move on to more details. The global financial market is undergoing a lot of changes in terms of USD exchange rate. It is rising sharply. The global capital seems to be moving out of emerging economies. So globally speaking, we did a long-term analysis and observation of the trend, and I have some insight I'd like to share with all of you. First of all, in terms of the debt market, it has become an important destination for global investment. We see a facilitation of our investment in terms of debt. And this market has become more and more attractive in terms of bond investment. And the total number for bond investment in the first half is about 800 billion USD. So that's 1/3 of the total foreign investment. More and more foreign investors come to China to invest in our bond market. And we also have domestic business who issue bonds overseas. This is the stock amount, and in terms of incremental, from 2017 to 2021, the total capital that goes to the bond market ranked number 4 in the world after US, Japan, and the UK. So we are one of the major destinations for bond investment. And this kind of trend will not change due to some short-term fluctuations and changes. And second, in a global scale, China registered a very stable gesture in terms of bond investment, because it is only natural for bond market to fluctuate, be it in developed countries or developing countries or emerging economies. For example, the bond market in the US, we saw reports all the time saying that some countries will sell out their bond in the US market. But after comparison, we can see that the fluctuation in Chinese bond market is actually lower than that of the other economies, especially emerging economies. And also from the structure of the investors, the central banks, the half of the investors are central banks in the other countries, and the other are capitals that are mainly investing in the indexes, which is also quite reliable and stable. So the opening up of foreign exchange market can help the market to become more resilient. In recent years, the commodity trade and direct investment and other cross-border capital flow can help us to unleash the potential of the basic balance and surplus, and this also encourage the investors in the bond market to encourage them to invest more. So we did some analysis which might rightly answer your question. So overall speaking, we have the bond market in China has very high value of investing, and it is also strongly supported by the economic basics. So we have room for improvement because the foreign capital accounts for only about 3% of the bond market in China and still has room for development. We are very confident of that as well. Thank you. How do you evaluate the fact that a outgoing of foreign businesses' profit, will that constitute pressure for our Forex reserve? Actually, in Q2 and Q3, we are used to see the foreign-founded companies' profit go out. The situation this year is still within a very reasonable range. The outgoing of the profit for foreign-founded companies still under control. I have some ideas I'd like to share with you and the other friends from the press. The current outflow of the foreign-founded companies' profit is still in accordance with our scale of foreign reserves. Our business environment is improving in the past years. We see more and more multinational companies who decide to expand their business in China, and they also see a rise in terms of their profit. So that would naturally explain where we saw a rising of the outflow of profit. It is up by about 13%, but the overall profit of foreign-founded companies in China is about 14%. So this is quite natural, because the outflow of the growth speed for outflow of profit is actually slower than that of the total increase of profit. The outflow of profit will influence the Forex market, of course, but it's still under control. So the return on investment is part of the current account income. The in and out of current account will help us to maintain a healthy balance. This kind of outflow will not will not shake the stability of our current account. And also the stabilization of RMB exchange rate and a large amount of such an outflow of profit is actually denominated in the RMB. So the outflow of profit does not mean the withdrawal of investment. This is actually a very benign cycle in terms of foreign exchange flow. The foreign investment has general profit, and then it goes back to the home country and will then encourage more investors to come back to invest in China. So this is a healthy and benign cycle, and a large part of this profit will be used in reinvestment in China. After our calculation, this reinvestment rate is also very high. I like to say that SAFE administration of the foreign currency has not been changed, and we actually encourage and support normal and reasonable outflow of foreign profit. Currently, we see a tightening for the global financial market, especially the foreign exchange market. So how do you evaluate the risk of the global financial market? In terms of foreign bonds, the total balance is about 2 trillion USD, which is down by 36 billion USD. That is down by 1%. We think that's quite an acceptable number. Despite the external factors, now and the future, China's foreign debt will remain a quite stable, but you mentioned this deleveraging risk. I think we still have reasons to be confident of China's foreign debt development. So foreign debts account for about 14 to 16% of the growth of the real economy. So we do not have a lot of stock in terms of foreign debt, so there will not be a major outflow of foreign debt. So we are not heavily leveraged in the first place. So the risk of deleverage is relatively acceptable. The RMB exchange rate, on the other hand, is fluctuating within a reasonable range. So this over-deleveraging risk is not very high as well, because the risks are not accumulated. And second, the structure of foreign exchange are optimized. This year, we see a rise in terms of foreign debt. This mainly comes from foreign investment and RMB bonds issued in China. And a lot of these investors have actual need investment. And traditionally, this foreign debt is not rising sharply. Our foreign asset and investment structure are also being optimized. We have always been the creditor in terms of foreign debt, And in Q1, the credit for us is about 2 trillion. And the balance accounts for 79% of the total debt volume. So in terms of bonds, savings and loans, we see some positive signals in terms of numbers. Banks and other agencies are solvent from what we can see at the moment. This is the second aspect I'd like to say in terms of deleveraging. The third aspect, we need to take a look at some key factors in terms of the foreign debt market. We are a big country for savings, and in our current account, we may remain a healthy amount of balance. So the debt ratio and the ratio of long-term debt are within the safety line, much lower than that of developing countries and emerging economies as well. We now hold the highest amount of foreign reserve in the world, and this debt asset is about 45% that of the foreign reserve, which is also much lower. It's well below the alert line of the global community. And coming up, we will strengthen our monitoring of the foreign debt market so as to fend off any risks that may occur. Thank you.
Can you give us your outlook for the exchange rate in the second half of the year as the Fed is planning to tighten, and also the yen and the euro seem to continue to be devaluing over this period? What is your expectation for the yuan? Thank you.
好，请翻译一下。彭博新闻社，美联储将收紧货币政策，日元和欧元贬值。那么在此背景下，您如何看待下半年人民币汇率前景？谢谢。
谢谢你的问题。刚才我介绍了上半年人民币汇率呢是总体稳定。
I actually talk about the situation of RMB in the first half. It is quite sound in terms of exchange rate, and you asked about the second half. We believe that the RMB exchange rate will still be fluctuating within a reasonable range. I think that's the conclusion part of my reply. There are several points to support that conclusion. So first of all, China's economy is beginning to restoring, and we see some promising trend in terms of the major indicators. So the basics of our economy is sound and healthy, and also China's foreign trade and foreign exchange rate are quite resilient from our past experiences. As I mentioned earlier, the commodity trade and direct investment would be long-term, will constitute this long-term inflow of capital, which will help us to remain a balance in terms of our foreign exchange market. I have a third point to make, that is for the expectations of the market participant. Most of the participants are quite right now are quite optimistic about China's economy and its foreign trade. So our foreign reserve in China remained stable and registered #1 in the world, helping us to stabilize the national economy and domestic market. But we cannot ignore that the exchange rate will be affected by multiple factors, including the global financial market and global economy, and we might see some fluctuations in the short term, rising or falling as it may, but we believe that the RMB exchange rate will remain stable within a reasonable range. That's my reply to your question. Thank you. Thank you, with CMG. In the first half, the SAFE has done some measures in terms of stabilizing the Forex market. So can you tell us more about your plan in the second half? SAFE support the businesses to fend off the risk, to support the development of the real economy, especially the SMEs. So we have reduced the cost for risk avoidance and help the businesses to become more resilient. We have taken the following measures. To stabilize the Forex market. First of all, in April this year, the PBOC and SAFE together jointly issued this notice to encourage the government, bank, and business mechanism to fend off the risk and improve the risk resilient ability for the businesses, especially those businesses that involve foreign currency and exchange rate. We also have exempted the SMEs transaction fee in terms of derivative transaction. In May this year, SAFE issued a notice on the innovation of futures. We have released 2 new products in terms of futures. We also encourage the RMB derivatives. The MOFCOM, PBOC, and SAFE jointly issued measures to encourage the businesses to conduct policy educational trainings so that people can know more about our measures, our supportive measures. So actually, foreign exchange risk rate risk of avoidance is an important factor, but probably a foreign concept to a lot of people. So it is necessary to conduct trainings, and we have also published the relevant knowledge to our website and our publications. This kind of guidance will educate the investors and business about the exchange rate utilization, risk avoidance, and other mitigating measures that can be adopted by the SOEs and SMEs. So we have targeted measures to address the above-mentioned problems and situations. We also cited some outstanding examples of businesses in their usage of foreign exchange, and this publication is actually quite easy to read. Hopefully, it can serve as an important reference for the businesses who are or intending to use a foreign exchange, a foreign currency. So we see a rise in terms of futures investment, and it's up by 4.1% compared to last year. I believe that 4.1 percentage point is a very healthy amount of growth. Involving 17,000 businesses. That is to say, about 17,000 SMEs, mostly SMEs, open up new account in terms of trades in futures. And we attach great importance in terms of providing better services to the new clients and accounts. Coming up, we will continue to unleash the policy bonus for risk avoidance in terms of foreign exchange. Will help the financial institutions to provide better services to help the businesses to avoid risks. And second, we will support the local governments to help promote the best practices for SMEs in using foreign funds, reduce the cost of using foreign funds, and increase the benefit of it. And three, after the release of the guidance, we will be working with MOFCOM and other relevant departments and ministries to educate the enterprises and businesses so that they can have a better knowledge of the utilization of foreign funds and also avoid risks of foreign exchange rates. This is the work that we've done in the first half and our plan of the second half. Thank you. Last two questions. Thank you. This year, the deficit for service trade is shrinking, and will our commodity surplus continue to expand this year? In terms of service trade, it involves a lot of factors. If you come to our website to check out this international account balance, we can see that it involves traveling, transportation, IPR, the OEM, the other services including IT and commerce. So this is quite a complex issue. After the breaking out of the global pandemic, our cross-border travels is severely affected, but we see some promising indicators in the other sectors. The overall condition for service trade is actually rising. In Q1 of this year, the receipt and payment scale is up by 26% compared to the same time of last year. With the support of overseas studies and others, we see some restoration in terms of travels.
那么2021年又比2020
And for the
年
other sectors,
41，今年一季度继续增长，这是第一个。
they have already exceeded the level of 2019, and compared to 2020, it is up by 41%. And in terms of the service trade deficit, it is shrinking. In Q1, the deficit for travel is 22 billion, which is up by 53% of last year, but it's still lower than 2019.
是576亿美元。那么其他形式的服务贸易合计是顺差128亿美元。那这个是
We register surplus in the other sectors for trade surplus for service trade.
那么在服务贸易线下呢，第
This
三个
is
方面的
why we see a shrinking in terms of service trade of the first half this year
收
overall.
入增加，
Part of
实际上
the
体现了
trade
相关的
in
这个
service
国际竞争能力的提升。主要我们观察到
shows that
运
we
输和
have a higher competitive
计算
edge
机信息服务
in the global market in terms of service
其中
sector,
运输的收入呢，
mainly transportation and IT services. In terms of transportation,
一方
we
面
see
是国际
an
运输价格高于运行，
major increase since the second half of 2020.
抓住机遇，大力发
It
展
shows that our
这是
transportation service providers have captured this important opportunity to expand their
服务业数字
business.
化转型，
China's manufacture industry and service industry are heavily integrated,
生产
namely the manufacture of IT devices and
所以这是
the other emerging
分享。
industries are
总的
also
来看，今年以来中
injecting
国的服务贸易
new
收入
stamina
呈现了
or
增长
new
的态势，
dynamics
收入增长
to the service trade.
推动了服务贸易的逆差呢进一步收窄。我们想未来中国的服务贸易发展的格局
We
呢将会
believe
继续
that in the
深
future,
演变
the
随着
service trade of China will continue to upgrade and
我
change.
们认为中国服务
We will become more competitive in terms of
增长
outsourcing and export of services,
深层次的影响
which will also help us
很多问题
to
做上述的回应
continue to shrink the deficit in terms of service trade. Last question.
好，谢谢主持人。第一财经日报记者提问：在美联储大幅加息的背景下，请问如何
Thank you.
看待未来我
The
国
Federal Reserve is increasing the interest rate, so how do you evaluate China's foreign exchange rate in the second half and also the foreign capital flow?
好，谢谢您的问题，这是一个传统问题。我们以前这个
This is a
讲
very
因为
typical
目前
question
美联储非常规的
concerning
货币政策
Forex
是对美国以外的
market
其他经济
because
体
the changing in Federal Reserves, especially when it comes to interest rate, is an important
应该说距离
factor
上
that
一次
affects
美联储
countries
释放
and
这个
foreign
紧
exchange
缩
market other
信
than
号的
US.
是2013年快10年了。
I believe
那么
it
在这个
was
期间呢，中
in
国经济发
10
展
years
是
ago when Federal
取得了
Reserve
历史性的成就，应该说实
adopt
现了
a
更高水平的发展和
more
更高水平的开放。
tightened its
我们的发展质
foreign
量
tighten its currency policy, but after 10 years, China's
那么我们觉得
Forex
在这
market
10年中所取得的成就和
has
变
been
化，对
improving.
当前来说
So we
更有
have
信心
achieved a lot in the
和
past 10
更有
years.
条件
So
来有效地化解
now we are very confident and we are
对中国
much better prepared
的影响。
to fend off the risks that is triggered by the policy changes concerning the Federal Reserves. So we are confident that the foreign exchange rate market in China will remain stable.
亮眼的就是我们国家的综合实力更加雄厚。
Looking back to the last 10 years, the comprehensive national strength has been improved, and so we are now at a better position to deal with the risks. The economy has become more coordinated and balanced and more sustainable as well. Last year, the GNP is 2 times higher than that of 2012.
2022年的11%也到了18%以上。那国家的经济实力、科技实力和综合国力都迈上了一个新的台阶。
So our national strengths, including technology and economy, are
主要的宏观经济指标呢较快的
increasing
经济呢
rapidly.
总体呢保持了恢复发展的态势。
This year, despite the
6月份
fact
制造业
of COVID-19, we see some positive signals of recovery in economy concerning consumption and investment domestically.
随着各项稳增长
So the momentum for economic growth with the implementation of all the policies
国力
are
实力更加雄厚。那么第二个呢，就是国际收支结构
quite
更加稳
promising.
健
And in terms of foreign exchange, we are now at a better position to protect the safety of foreign currency exchanges, because our current account surplus is about 2% of the total GDP, which is quite healthy. At the same time, our debt structure has been optimized, which is previously mentioned by me. The private sector's holding of foreign assets exceeds 6 trillion. So we have multiple tools to deal with external risks. We also talked about foreign debt. It is actually in line with, in accordance with the economic growth, and all the major factors are within safety line. These are some positive signals for foreign exchange market. China's opening up of its currency rate market will also help us to better our environment for investors, so as to facilitate more and more foreign-founded companies to come to China to invest and expand their business. So this is actually a dual way. It's a two-way street. We see foreign investment coming into the market, and there are also Chinese businesses that are going out and expand their global reach. The maturing of China's Forex market will help us to better prepare ourselves for possible risks and fluctuation in the global market. And China's Forex market's adjustment mechanism and the micro and the macro control measures have been improved. We see that the RMB exchange rate becomes more resilient. And the market participant now have a promising and optimistic expectations for RMB exchange rate, so we are very much prepared to fend off the risk for cross-border capital flow. I think the adjustment of Federal Reserve's policy will affect the US dollar's foreign exchange rate, of course, but we will need to wait and see for the risk to pan out. the Federal Reserve are also facing a tough choice in terms of economic growth and inflation. So we'll have to wait and see the Federal Reserve's change of its policy, whether it will, and also the extent to which it tightens its currency policy.
为有效防范化解这个外部的冲击做好这个准备。
I think we will closely monitor the changes in the global financial market in order to guard against any risks that may happen. Thank you. That's all for today's presser.